Inside your gut, right at this moment, there is a living ecosystem, trillions of microorganisms that not only inhabit your body, but actively influence the aging process. This is not a metaphor. It is biology. And the question science is answering right now is, what happens to this ecosystem over the decades, and what does that mean for your brain? Today, you're going to discover that the gut and the brain communicate directly. And that this conversation may already be determining how you will age. Imagine a garden. At the beginning of adulthood, it is rich, diverse, full of different species, each serving a purpose. But over time, some plants begin to dominate. Others disappear. The balance changes. That is exactly what happens to your gut microbiota. As we age, the composition and abundance of gut bacteria change, and one of the most consistent hallmarks of this process is the loss of microbial diversity. Beneficial species that were present in midlife begin to decline. And in their place, opportunistic bacteria begin to grow, the kind associated with chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and metabolic disease. But here's the point that changes everything. Not everyone ages the same way. And the microbiome seems to know that before you do. In 2021, researchers published one of the most provocative studies ever conducted on the microbiome and longevity in Nature Metabolism. They analyzed more than 9,000 individuals across 3 independent cohorts and discovered that, beginning in midlife and continuing into later adulthood, the gut microbiome becomes progressively unique, different for every person, like a biological fingerprint. And what distinguished those who aged well from those who aged with disease? The signature of healthy aging was characterized by a reduction in common bacteria, particularly the genus Bacteroides. Individuals with a high dominance of Bacteroides in advanced age showed lower survival rates during a 4-year follow-up period. In other words, maintaining a generic microbiome, one that looks like everyone else's, in old age is a risk marker. People who age well develop a microbiome that becomes increasingly unique, more personalized, and more adapted. And this unique microbiome is not random. It is highly correlated with metabolites produced by microorganisms that circulate in the bloodstream, including tryptophan derivatives that have already been shown to extend lifespan in animal models, and phenylacetylglutamine, a metabolite found at elevated concentrations in the blood of centenarians. The gut of someone who lives a long life, and lives it well, has a different chemistry. It produces different molecules. And those molecules reach the brain. How does the gut communicate with the brain? There is a direct pathway, a nerve that travels from the brainstem down to the abdomen, passing through the heart, lungs, and internal organs along the way. It is called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve forms a bidirectional communication channel between the brain and the gastrointestinal tract, and gut bacteria communicate through it using metabolites, short-chain fatty acids, lipopolysaccharides, and even neurotransmitters. That means what lives inside your gut sends direct signals to your brain. Not symbolically. Literally. Chemically. Electrically. And when this channel is disrupted, when the microbiome ages poorly, the consequences reach memory itself. In 2026, researchers at Stanford University published a study in Nature that gets straight to the point. They showed that the microbiome changes with age, favoring certain species at the expense of others. These changes are detected by immune cells in the gastrointestinal tract, which trigger an inflammatory response that impairs the vagus nerve's ability to signal the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for memory formation and spatial navigation. The hippocampus. The structure that determines what you remember and what you forget. The researchers went even further. They identified a specific bacterium, Parabacteroides goldsteini, whose abundance increases with aging and is directly associated with cognitive decline. When they colonized the intestines of young mice with this bacterium, the animals began behaving as though they were old, showing impaired cognitive performance in memory and navigation tests. And then came the most remarkable part. When the researchers stimulated the vagus nerve in older animals, their cognitive performance became indistinguishable from that of young animals. They stimulated a nerve and restored memory. When young mice that had received the aged microbiome were treated with antibiotics, eliminating the bacteria, their cognitive abilities returned to normal. The decline was not permanent. It was microbial. This brings us to the central point. All of this is not just fascinating, it is actionable. The microbiomes of long-lived individuals are characterized by greater diversity, a higher presence of beneficial bacteria, and better intestinal homeostasis. And science has already identified concrete ways to influence it. Fiber intake, regular exercise, and supplementation with probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics are interventions with real potential to modify the microbiome and promote vitality in later life. But the deeper point is something else. For decades, the gut was treated as a digestive system. A processing factory. You ate. It absorbed. End of story. Science is now saying something different. The gut is a communication organ. It monitors the environment, processes information, produces neuroactive molecules, and sends them to the brain, continuously, throughout life. The loss of microbial diversity has become one of the hallmarks of aging, and disruptions in its composition are associated with age-related neurological conditions, including depression, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease. These are not diseases that appear out of nowhere. They are, in part, the result of decades of silence within the inner garden, an ecosystem that gradually lost its richness while nobody was paying attention. There is a phrase that keeps echoing after you study this field deeply. The microbiome ages before you do. It changes in midlife. It signals the brain. It produces, or fails to produce, the molecules that determine how you will function decades from now. Studies in animal models have demonstrated that transferring the microbiome from young organisms into middle-aged adults resulted in greater longevity and delayed behavioral decline, compared to those that received microbiome transplants from organisms of the same age group. The garden can be cultivated. And the best time to start is not when you are already sick. It is now, while the system still responds, still adapts, still grows. Science is not saying that the gut solves everything. It is saying something more precise. Neglecting this ecosystem carries a cost that eventually appears in the brain, in memory, and in cognition, silently, over the years. And caring for it, with consistency, with science, and with intention, may be one of the most direct ways to influence not only how long you live, but how you live that time. This is Beyond the Years, where science meets longevity. If this video made you think differently about what is happening inside your body, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next episode.